Flashing lights in the rearview mirror. For most Americans, it's a minor inconvenience, a quick spike of annoyance before getting back on the road. But for others, it's a moment where time slows, hands tighten on the steering wheel, and every movement is calculated. What if one of those routine traffic stops didn't end in outrage, but in transformation? What if, instead of anger going viral, two men chose something far more radical in today's America, an honest conversation? This isn't a story about scandal. It's not about lawsuits. It's about what happens when truth is spoken calmly and actually heard. Because sometimes the most powerful change in this country doesn't begin with a protest sign or a headline. It begins with a knock on a front door. What happened on a quiet road in Charlotte, North Carolina on the evening of March 14th will leave you absolutely speechless. And it was all caught on a dash cam. Every single second of it. Every word. Every look. Every moment of silence. All recorded. All undeniable. Officer Ryan Mitchell was a 12-year veteran of the Charlotte Police Department. 12 years of service. 12 years of wearing the badge. He was white, 41 years old, married to his high school sweetheart Karen, and a proud father of two young boys, Tyler, who was 10, and Jake, who was 7. Everyone in the department respected him. His captain trusted him. His neighbors waved at him every morning when he left for work. He coached Little League baseball on weekends and volunteered at the church food drive every Thanksgiving. By every measure that mattered in his world, Ryan Mitchell was considered a good cop, one of the best, actually. He had commendations hanging on his office wall. He had letters of appreciation from citizens he had helped over the years. He had a reputation for being tough but fair. The kind of officer who followed the rules, kept his cool, and did things by the book. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. That Tuesday night, Ryan was patrolling a wealthy neighborhood called Preston Hills. If you have never been to Preston Hills, let me paint the picture for you. It was one of the most exclusive communities in all of Charlotte. We are talking about million-dollar mansions hidden behind tall iron gates and rows of ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Perfectly manicured lawns that stretched out like green carpets. Driveways lined with luxury cars, Porsches, Range Rovers, BMWs, parked casually like they were nothing special. Preston Hills was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happened. No crime, no trouble, no disturbances, just quiet money living behind closed doors. The most exciting call Ryan had ever received from this neighborhood was a noise complaint about a pool party that went past 10 o'clock. That was it. That was the level of danger in Preston Hills. Ryan had been driving slowly through the tree-lined streets, his window cracked open, the warm Carolina air drifting into the cruiser. The radio was quiet. The streets were empty. It was shaping up to be another uneventful Tuesday night shift, the kind where you count the hours and think about what your wife might have left in the fridge for dinner. And then everything changed. That's when a glossy black Mercedes Maybach rolled past him. Now, if you don't know what a Mercedes Maybach looks like, imagine the most elegant, most luxurious, most expensive sedan you have ever seen, and then double it. This car was a masterpiece on wheels. It moved down the road like a whisper, its polished black paint reflecting the streetlights like liquid glass. The car alone was worth more than Ryan's entire house. More than his house, his cruiser, and probably everything inside his garage combined. But here is the thing. It wasn't the car that caught Ryan's attention. It was the driver, a black man, alone, driving through one of the wealthiest and whitest neighborhoods in the entire city at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Something fired in Ryan's brain. Not a thought exactly, more like an instinct, a reflex that had been built over years of assumptions he never bothered to question. He didn't see a resident. He didn't see a homeowner. He didn't see a man simply driving home after a long day. He saw something that didn't fit, something that looked out of place. And that feeling, that gut reaction he had never examined, was enough. Without thinking twice, Ryan hit his sirens. The blue and red lights exploded across the quiet street, bouncing off the mansions and the iron gates and the oak trees. The Maybach didn't speed up. It didn't hesitate. It pulled over gently and smoothly to the side of the road, coming to rest beneath a streetlight like the driver had done this 1,000 times before. Ryan grabbed his flashlight. He checked his mirror. He adjusted his body camera. Then he stepped out of the cruiser and walked toward the driver's side window with slow, deliberate steps. His right hand rested near his holster, not gripping it, but close enough, just in case. That's what he told himself. Just in case. The window came down slowly, almost peacefully. No rush, no panic. And there he was. The man inside looked calm, almost too calm. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt, the kind you buy in a pack of 3 from a department store. Reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead. His hands were resting on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Visible, deliberate, intentional. He knew the drill. "Good evening. License and registration, please," Ryan said firmly. No smile, no warmth, no explanation for why he had pulled the car over in the first place. The man looked up at Ryan with dark brown eyes that held no anger, no fear, and no surprise. He looked tired. Not physically tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. This was something deeper, something heavier. It was the kind of tired that settles into your bones after years and years of being stopped, questioned, doubted, and dismissed. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how high you climb, no matter how much you earn. It was the tired of a man who had been through this exact moment 100 times before. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that it would happen again. Hashtag Section 2. The man Ryan didn't recognize expanded. The driver handed over his documents without a single word. No protest, no questions, no attitude, just a calm, steady hand extending a pristine driver's license and a neatly folded registration card through the open window. It was smooth, practiced, the kind of motion that comes from doing something so many times that it becomes muscle memory, like tying your shoes or buckling your seatbelt. His name was Solomon Carter. That name meant absolutely nothing to Ryan Mitchell. He glanced at the license, read the name, and felt nothing. No recognition, no spark, no moment of realization. To Ryan, this was just another name on another card during another traffic stop on another Tuesday night. But that name, Solomon Carter, meant everything to the rest of the world. Solomon Carter was the founder, chairman, and CEO of Carter Global Industries, one of the most powerful and far-reaching technology and real estate empires in the entire United States. We're not talking about a small business. We're not talking about a startup. We're talking about a massive, sprawling corporation valued at $4.7 billion. A company that employed over 11,000 people across 8 states. A company that had developed cutting-edge software used by hospitals, universities, and government agencies around the world. Solomon Carter had been on the cover of Forbes magazine not once, not twice, but 3 times. Bloomberg had called him one of the most influential business minds of his generation. He had been invited to speak at Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. He had sat across the table from world leaders, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and built partnerships with some of the biggest names in global technology. He owned properties in 12 countries, a penthouse in London, a villa in the south of France, a beachfront estate in the Bahamas, a luxury apartment in Tokyo. His art collection alone was worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. He had a private jet, a yacht, and a charitable foundation that had changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Speaking of charity, Solomon Carter had donated over $300 million of his personal wealth to hospitals, schools, community centers, and scholarship programs across America. He had built an entire children's hospital wing in Detroit, the city where he grew up. He had funded clean water projects in 3 African nations. He had personally paid for the college education of over 2,000 young men and women from underserved communities who otherwise would never have had the chance. This was Solomon Carter, a titan, a visionary, a man who had risen from absolutely nothing, from a cramped apartment in one of Detroit's roughest neighborhoods, to the very top of the American dream. And right now, at this very moment, this giant of a man was sitting on the side of a quiet road in his own neighborhood, in front of his own home, being questioned by a police officer who had absolutely no legal reason to stop him. "Do you live around here?" Ryan asked, leaning down and shining his flashlight directly across Solomon's face. The beam cut through the dark interior of the Maybach like a blade. Solomon squinted against the harsh white light. He didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. He just narrowed his eyes slightly and answered in a voice that was steady and measured. The voice of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals and didn't rattle easily. "Yes, officer. I live at the end of this street. The house with the stone fountain." Ryan paused. He almost laughed. Almost. He caught himself just in time, but the doubt was written all over his face like a headline in a newspaper. Because the house at the end of this street, the one with the stone fountain, was the biggest, most expensive property in all of Crescent Hills. It was an 8-bedroom, 12-bathroom estate sitting on 5 acres of perfectly landscaped land. It had a private tennis court, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a 6-car garage, and a guest house that was bigger than most regular homes. The property was surrounded by a custom-built stone wall with hand-carved iron gates at the entrance. The fountain Solomon mentioned was a massive Italian marble masterpiece that sat in the center of a circular driveway, imported from Florence and installed by artisans who had flown in specifically for the job. That house was worth $14 million. There was no way, Ryan thought, absolutely no way, that this man in a plain gray t-shirt lived there. No way. His brain simply couldn't connect the image in front of him with the reality of that estate. A black man in a t-shirt and reading glasses couldn't possibly own the most valuable piece of real estate in this neighborhood. That's what Ryan's mind told him. Not with words exactly. More like a feeling. An assumption so deeply buried that he didn't even recognize it as bias. "That's a pretty expensive house," Ryan said slowly, and the doubt was dripping from every single word like water from a leaking faucet. He wasn't even trying to hide it. His tone said everything his mouth wouldn't. "I don't believe you. You don't belong here. Prove it." Solomon heard it all. Every drop of doubt. Every unspoken accusation. He had heard that tone before. In boardrooms, in hotels, in restaurants, in airports, in his own driveway. The tone that said no matter what you have accomplished, no matter how far you have come, you will always have to prove yourself to people who have achieved a fraction of what you have. "It is," Solomon replied quietly. Simply. Without defensiveness. Without anger. "I bought it 6 years ago. Paid cash." 3 words that should have ended the conversation right there. Paid. Cash. The man didn't finance it. He didn't mortgage it. He wrote a check and bought one of the most expensive homes in Charlotte, North Carolina, like someone buying groceries on a Saturday morning. But Ryan wasn't satisfied. Something in him still resisted. Still doubted. He took the documents back to his cruiser without another word. He sat down behind the wheel, typed Solomon's information into the system, and ran the plates. He checked everything. The license, the registration, the vehicle identification number, the address, the criminal history. And what came back? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The car was registered to Solomon James Carter. The address on file matched the estate at the end of the street, the one with the stone fountain. There were no warrants. No outstanding tickets. No violations of any kind. Not even a parking ticket. The man's record was cleaner than a hospital floor. Everything checked out perfectly. Ryan sat in his cruiser for a long moment. A very long moment. The screen glowed in front of him, displaying all the information he needed to see. All the proof that this stop was baseless, groundless, and completely unjustified. He stared at that screen, and something uncomfortable began crawling through his stomach. It started small, like a tiny knot twisting just below his ribs. But with every passing second, it grew. It spread through his chest and up into his throat until it became something he couldn't swallow and couldn't ignore. He had no reason to make this stop. None. Zero. There was no traffic violation. No broken taillight. No expired tags. No reckless driving. No suspicious behavior. Nothing that any court, any judge, any review board would consider a legitimate cause for pulling this man over. Ryan knew it. He had known it the moment he hit those sirens. And now, the dashcam knew it too. That small black camera mounted on his windshield had captured everything. The Maybach driving at normal speed. The sirens activating for no reason. The stop. The flashlight in Solomon's face. The doubt in Ryan's voice. Every second of it was recorded, time-stamped, and stored on a hard drive that couldn't be erased, edited, or explained away. The evidence of what he had done, and more importantly, why he had done it, was now permanent. Ryan took a deep breath. He picked up Solomon's documents from the passenger seat, and he opened his car door, stepping back out into the warm Carolina night, walking toward the Maybach one more time, this time with a weight on his shoulders that hadn't been there before. The weight of truth. Ryan walked back to the window. He handed Solomon his documents and cleared his throat. Everything checks out. You're free to go. Have a good night. He turned to walk away, but Solomon's voice stopped him cold. Officer Mitchell. Ryan turned around. Solomon wasn't angry. He wasn't raising his voice. He was just looking at Ryan with eyes that carried decades of the same exhaustion. I built my company from a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit. My mother cleaned office buildings at night, so I could go to school during the day. I worked 20-hour days for 15 years to build everything I have. I employ over 9,000 people. I pay more in taxes every year than most people will earn a lifetime. He paused. The silence between them was thick, charged with something Ryan couldn't name, but could feel pressing against his chest like a physical weight. And yet, I still can't drive through my own neighborhood without being treated like a suspect. I need you to sit with that tonight. Not for me. I'm used to this. But I have a 13-year-old daughter who watches everything. She sees how this world treats her father. And she's starting to believe that no matter what she achieves, it will never be enough. Ryan stood frozen. His flashlight hung at his side. His mouth was dry. He searched for words, an explanation, a defense, an apology, but everything that rose to his tongue felt hollow, insufficient, like trying to put a bandage on a wound that had been bleeding for generations. Solomon wasn't asking for words. He was asking for something far more difficult. He was asking Ryan to look at himself. He didn't say a word. He just nodded slowly and walked back to his cruiser. He sat behind the wheel for a long time before turning the key. In the rearview mirror, he watched Solomon's taillights disappear around the corner. A man driving home in his own neighborhood, in his own car, having just been forced to prove he belonged there. Ryan's hands were trembling slightly. He gripped the steering wheel to steady them. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every streetlight seemed too bright. Every shadow seemed to hold a question he wasn't ready to answer. That night, Ryan went home and sat alone in his garage for 2 hours. He didn't turn on the light. He sat in the old folding chair beside his workbench, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and sawdust, and he replayed every traffic stop he had ever made. Not the ones that stood out, not the high-speed chases or the DUI arrests or the nights that earned him commendations. He replayed the ordinary ones, the routine ones, the ones he had never thought twice about. And he thought about patterns he had never wanted to see. The way his hand moved to his holster a little faster for some drivers and not others. The way he asked certain people where they were coming from, where they were going, whether the car was really theirs, questions he never asked others. The way he could feel his body tense when he approached certain vehicles, not because of any specific threat, but because of something deeper, something woven into him so early and so quietly that he had mistaken it for instinct. He had always told himself he treated everyone the same. He had believed it. He had needed to believe it because the alternative meant that the uniform he wore with pride, the badge he had sworn an oath on, had been wielding authority unevenly, and he had been too comfortable to notice. Solomon's words echoed in the dark garage. She's starting to believe that no matter what she achieves, it will never be enough. Ryan thought about his own daughter, Lily, who was 11. He thought about the world she moved through without friction, the way she could ride her bike through any neighborhood, walk into any store, exist in any space without ever being made to feel like she didn't belong. He had never once worried that someone in a position of power would look at her and see a threat instead of a child. Solomon's daughter didn't have that luxury, and Ryan was part of the reason why. The realization didn't come as a thunderclap. It came as a slow, sickening settling, like watching the foundation of a house you built yourself reveal its cracks. He couldn't unknow it now. He couldn't unsee the patterns. He couldn't retreat into the comfortable story he had told himself for 15 years, that he was one of the good ones. For the first time in his career, he saw himself clearly. And clarity, he discovered, was not a gift. It was a burden, one that demanded he decide what kind of man he would be from this moment forward. He could carry this weight and let it change him, or he could set it down by mourning, file it away, and go back to being the officer he had always been. He sat in the dark for another hour. Then he made his choice. 3 days after the traffic stop, Ryan Mitchell stood on Solomon Carter's front porch, trying to steady his breathing. He had rehearsed what he would say at least a dozen times in the car. None of it sounded adequate. None of it felt big enough to hold the weight of what he now understood. He wasn't in uniform. No badge. No cruiser parked at the curb. Just jeans, a plain white shirt, and the uneasy awareness that for the first time in his career, he was approaching a door without the shield of authority. He knocked. Footsteps approached from inside the house. The door opened, and Solomon stood there, calm, composed, unreadable. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "I came to apologize," Ryan said finally. His voice cracked in a way that embarrassed him, but he didn't try to hide it. "Not as a cop. As a man. As a father. What I did was wrong. I've been carrying biases I didn't even know I had. And your words made me see something I've been blind to my whole life." Solomon studied him carefully, not with hostility, but with discernment, as if weighing sincerity against pride. "You didn't have to come here," Solomon said. "I know," Ryan replied, "but I needed to." Another pause. Then Solomon stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in. Let's talk." That conversation lasted 4 hours. They sat at the kitchen table first, then moved to the living room when the afternoon light shifted. They spoke about race, not in slogans or sound bites, but in lived experience. Solomon shared stories of boardrooms where he had been mistaken for the help, of neighborhoods where security followed him, of police stops that felt less like protection and more like presumption. Ryan listened, not defensively, not to respond, but to understand. He spoke about his upbringing, a family of officers, dinner table conversations about danger and vigilance, the way the job slowly shaped how he saw the world. He admitted how often instinct had been praised without questioning where that instinct was formed. They talked about fear, the fear officers carry walking up to a vehicle at night, and the fear families carry watching flashing lights in the rearview mirror. "Fear makes us smaller," Solomon said quietly. "It narrows what we're able to see." They talked about fatherhood. Solomon described the moment his daughter, Maya, had asked him why he kept both hands on the steering wheel even after turning off the car. Ryan felt something shift in his chest at that. He thought about his own daughter and how he had never had to teach her to narrate her movements in the presence of authority. By the third hour, the air between them felt different. Less tense, more human. At one point, Solomon leaned forward and said, "You know what would really matter? Not just you changing, but you helping other officers see what you saw." The idea hung there. Ryan didn't answer right away. The department wasn't known for embracing introspection. Change would be uncomfortable, possibly unpopular. But the image of Maya watching her father, measuring the world's response to him, stayed with him. "What if," Ryan said slowly, "we created space for real conversations? Not lectures, not accusations, just honesty." Solomon nodded. "And food," he added with a faint smile. "Nobody listens well on an empty stomach." They both laughed, the first easy laugh of the afternoon. That was the beginning of Beyond the Badge. In the months that followed, the idea took shape in community centers and church basements. They invited officers and Black families to sit at round tables together. No podiums at first, no scripts, just guided dialogue and shared meals. The first session was tense. Officers sat stiffly, unsure what they might be accused of. Families arrived guarded, unsure if they would be heard. But as the evening unfolded, stories replaced stereotypes. A mother spoke about teaching her son to keep receipts in the glove compartment, just in case. An officer admitted he had never considered how often a simple stop could echo in a child's memory. A teenager described what it felt like to be viewed as suspicious before speaking a word. Ryan told his story publicly for the first time that night. He didn't frame himself as a hero. He described the garage, the silence, the discomfort of recognizing bias in himself. "I almost missed the chance to change," he said, "because I thought being not bad was good enough." Something softened in the room when he said that. Word spread. Within 6 months, Beyond the Badge had trained over 150 officers. Ryan developed workshops that explored implicit bias, historical context, and communication under stress. Solomon brought in business leaders and community advocates to expand the conversation beyond policing alone. They emphasized one principle above all: accountability without dehumanization. Ryan stood on stages across the state and eventually across the country, telling audiences that transformation doesn't begin with shame. It begins with humility. Solomon stood beside him often, not as a victim of injustice, but as a partner in building something better. At the program's first graduation ceremony, families and officers filled a large community auditorium. There were uniforms in the front row and children swinging their legs from folding chairs. Maya Carter approached the podium. She was taller than Ryan remembered from that night, more confident, but her voice trembled slightly as she began. "My dad taught me that real power isn't money or fame," she said, scanning the room. "Real power is giving someone a chance to be better and watching them take it." There wasn't a dry eye in the building. Today, Beyond the Badge operates in 37 cities across America. What started as a 4-hour conversation has become a national initiative rooted in listening. Ryan left patrol duty to serve as the program's national director, not because he rejected policing, but because he believed protecting and serving required more than enforcement. It required relationship. Solomon considers Ryan one of his closest friends now. Their daughters have met. Their families have shared dinners. The story of that traffic stop is no longer just about bias. It's about possibility. Change didn't come from outrage. It didn't trend online. It wasn't born from a courtroom battle. It began with one man choosing to speak truth instead of anger, and another choosing to listen instead of walk away. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't start in the streets. They start on the side of a quiet road and continue at a kitchen table.